Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Pioneer Valley Writers Workshop, and this is our open house for the 2025 manuscript program. Before we move into the reading, I just want to say a couple words about this program for anyone who is completely new to what we do and specifically to this program. So this is a 10-month program that runs every year from March through December. And it is for writers of any genre working on book-length manuscripts. So if you want support over a longer period of time, that is what this program is for. And it's unique in that writers join it at any stage of the process. So we have people often that are in the early stages of a manuscript, of a first draft. We have some people that are almost done with a draft, that are working closer to revision, and we have an actual revision section of the program for the novel also. So it's for intensive book length work. And the goal of the program is to help writers make significant strides on their manuscripts over the course of that time. It has a number of elements that support writers, a lot of them being asynchronous. There's a Google Classroom where a lot of the materials for the program, for the course, the different workshops are kept and people interact. There is a monthly workshop where the groups meet once a month. And there is a system of accountability throughout the month where writers are paired with a different accountability buddy each month to have that extra accountability. In addition to that, there are meetings with an instructor, and there are often separate things that happen too outside. Like some instructors have held office hours. There's end of year readings. So the goal is to create a community that supports writers over a longer period of time as they do this work, working on a manuscript. So that will help you understand when we hear our first reader that they have been working on these books for the course since March, and many of them before, actually, because a lot of times people come into this program with something already significant. We also have end of year readings that happen usually in January and February, and that's where everyone in a current section will be showcased and have a little bit of time. So if you want to be aware of that, to be notified about that, just make sure you're signed up for our mailing list or check back on our website under events. Those readings will be listed. They're open to the community. Before we move into our 4 student readers and their readings, I want to introduce our first administrative assistant, Heather Bryant, who is here with me, and she'll be here behind the scenes in Zoom too, and also in PVWW in general. So you may, whether you're an applicant to the program, whether you're a current student, whatever you're an instructor, you will encounter Heather behind the scenes here. We also have our TAs, 2 TAs in the manuscript program who will be joining us. Montana Harling, she's here waving, who was a TA last year in the novel sections of the program, and she'll be continuing this coming year, and we're so glad about that. She's a current MFA candidate at UMass Amherst and also a speculative fiction writer. Very cool. And we also have Marissa Dean, who will be joining as a TA in the memoir sections. And she is a writer, all around creative, and also manages a yoga studio in Northampton, which is where we met her. I am so excited to introduce our first reader. Jesse Taft is a current student in Liz Harmer's novel revision section. And I'm so excited that he's here with us to read a little from the novel he's been working on.
Great. Thank you. And I just wanted to say, first of all, it's been a really great experience in the revision workshop, working with Liz and classmates, and I have nothing but good things to say, and I'm excited to share a little bit of my manuscript here today. So, all right. Upon sighting the mountain man in close, each thought him a man younger than his age and experience, the hair thick and dark yet, any follicle hewed from ordinary, plain and countable on the scalp. A face carved from something igneous and hard, the angles unworn, cheeks smooth and wearing only the morning stubble. The same face he had owned 20 or 30 years prior, a face from forever ago to eternity. The monk fought to square the stories noised far and near with the man before him. No more obviously had man manifested as exactly that and nothing more. Burncoat looked a bit like every person he had ever known and like none of them. The eyes full dark, dull and inactive until he turned them on you. The body sized normally, but generous in some immeasurable way. He had designed a man to reconcile the folklore, in reality did not meet it. Father Boyne squatted at the edge of the warmth, tossing sticks into the coals and stealing glances at the mountain man over the growing fire. The mountain man watched and listened, following the development of the evening. He was handcuffed and now tethered by rope to the scaly trunk of an adjacent tree, all objects pointed or heavy removed from his circumference. But the monk gave him the care one would a wild beast in captivity. There was something alluring about the man, a fluency that at times outcompeted the danger and drew one in. In myriad stories, they had heard him to be Attila incarnate, a man born into the world to shake the nations, and they had witnessed with their eyes that very day the wrath he could deliver. Yet there was something upon examining the man separate from his deeds that did not square. Impossibly aged, versed and accomplished, the clothing modern and clean and perfect, the movements refined and almost effete. There was in him a novel concoction of life, a unique stacking of days and weeks and years, of introductions and interactions, of conflicts and resolutions, of merriment and madness. The man was a devil, or something in the genre, something not of his time and place. Within their small circle, he had caused undue harm to so many, not the least the monk, whose world he had shattered for reasons not understood. But within there was always something one wanted to know about Burncoat, some question to which only he might provide answer. Father Boyne wished to put a continent's worth of land between himself and the man, and yet he could not look away. You see something, Burncoat said. I see trouble, the monk said, his voice thin. I see a troubled man. The mountain man grinned, the silver fillings in his teeth catching the fire glow, his black eyes trained on the monk. Same, he said.
Wow. Thank you so much, Jesse. Next up, we have Amy Bell Ho, who's also in the novel revision workshop with Liz.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to read from the very beginning of my manuscript. Franny stood at the stoop, toes gripping its edge, observing helplessly as workmen cut apart the huge oak tree, piece by piece, from its place in the median. Rot, one had yelled apologetically to her over the buzzing of the skyward chainsaw when she'd come out to inquire why, all jittery from mustering her own voice. Why did they have to do it? I have a 4-week-old, she wanted to tell him, but she couldn't bring herself to yell. She couldn't find rot anywhere. To her eye, the tree looked completely healthy. She thought she'd known this tree. She'd walked by it so many times. Its debris was constantly underfoot. Its shade, a fact. Franny worried in anger as she stepped back onto her porch that it wasn't really rot, that there was some greed or delusion at work, something bad the city managers were doing. But then that made little sense. The rot was likely there, and if the tree fell, it would fall on her building. The work took all of one day. The arborists felled the leafy branches first, fed those to the sap-streaked maw of the chipper. The look of the tree after it had been denuded filled Franny with shame. She kept thinking, there's still a chance. If they stop right now, it might come back. Trees do that. Stumps keep sprouting. Stumps are very hard to kill. It was silly, magical thinking. She went off to tend to the baby, but came right back to stand at the window. With ropes and careful cuts, they took down the limbs, lowering them ever so gently to the ground. Her neighbor came out to move his car. He didn't look up at the tree once. Just an ancient fixture of our street being hauled away forever. Why should we observe that? Franny thought. Then a hole opened in her view of the sky, and new angles of light never before permitted by the sprawling tree beamed through and struck her in the face, fell across her pillows, illuminated the dust in the air. The tree, now a pointy trunk, then a blunt, lopped-off trunk, which shrank steadily as each new round was separated from its source and lowered, again with care, but not reverence, it seemed to Franny, into a dump truck to be driven off. Then some raking, a mediocre job, half-assed. They secured the chipper to the back of the dump truck, stowed their tools, and covered the still damp mulch under black netting. Piled into the truck's one bench seat, the whole rig creaking as it met with the bumps in the road. Gone. Later, after tummy time and TV with laundry folding and gazing at each other in wonder, Franny took Ruth in her arms out to the sidewalk in socked feet, taking care to step around the acorns, leaves, and twig dander that blanketed the parked cars, driveways, walkways, gardens, open soil, and drains to the sea in a 40-foot radius around the stump. She became aware of an imbalance, like her inner ear was in a free fall, as she got closer to it. The presence of the tree in that exact spot had been irrefutable for as long as she lived on that hill. It was now air, open and passable as a cliff's edge. She tapped the wet, raw middle of the stump with her socked foot. She wondered if they had poisoned it to prevent growth. Would they do that without putting up a notice? She stepped back and bent sideways to rip the sock from her foot. Poisons terrified her. Ruth wobbled in her arms and beat one tiny fist against Franny's chest with an urgency they felt as one. Again, time to nurse. Franny knelt down, plucked an acorn from the dirt of the median, placed it at the center of the rings of the once great, now gone tree, then winced as she straightened her legs from squatting, a move which required pressing Ruth tightly to her chest, the child's weight both ballast and burden. She turned back to her side of the building.
Thank you so much, Amy. Wow, what incredible writing. And again, I just want to say for anyone just joining us, this is a very, very short reading section today, but everyone here, as well as the rest of each of these workshop groups, will be reading probably January or February. There's end of year readings for everyone in the program. So stay tuned to hear more from everyone's projects and books they've been working on. Next up, from the memoir section of this year's program, we have Mudita G.V. Visha.
Thank you, Joy. The content of this piece includes child abuse, suicidal ideation, and homicidal intent. From the time he was able to sleep in a bed, Simon's father and I would read with him in it every night. It was a full-sized bed on purpose, so the three of us could fit into it together, Simon in the middle. Simon was born in 2001, around halfway into the publication of the Harry Potter series. By the time we began the first book together, he was reading by himself, and our relationship was such that when he objected because he thought it would be too scary, he believed us when we told him he had nothing to fear. When we got to the third volume, The Prisoner of Azkaban, things had gotten quite scary. We met Dementors. These creatures drained peace, hope, and happiness out of the air around them. They mutated vibrant beings into empty shells. They sucked souls. J.K. Rowling's treatment of the Dementors made them palpable, and I felt them as if they were there with us in that bed. But maybe I felt the Dementors because I had known them before reading about them. I had grown up with them. They had inhabited the apartment I had lived in with my mother. They plaqued the walls yellow-gray from the Pall Mall menthols that were always burning, whether in my mother's mouth or sitting in the ashtray when she got up from the velour couch with mauve and blue flowers to change the channel on the TV. They infested the concave twin bed I slept in, separated from my mother's own twin bed by a few feet of black and blue shag, blotched with gray and brown, that spanned the width of the room but not the length, so that the wood floor was bare a few inches in front of the wood grain plastic laminate dresser that I had to share with my mother. They lurked behind that dresser as my mother steadied herself against it to throw the too dry breakfast across the room at me, the advertised as durable Corelle plate, ricocheting white shards and yellow curds over me and my dark blue polyester fiber-filled comforter. They glutted the food in the cold metal cupboards that were next to the spattered stove on which I had scrambled those eggs, food that had been paid for by the government and sat alongside an always almost empty green bottle of Taylor cream sherry that my mother bought with her money from cleaning an office building at night. They defecated in the bathroom with the red and black indoor-outdoor carpet, tiled in light blue plastic with the shower that never worked, that my mother never got fixed, but with the bathtub that would have held enough water for me to drown in had I followed through with my plan in 4th grade. They blocked the overhead light, hovering that night a few years later, when I was 13 years old, and only fear of going to prison made me unlock my hands from my mother's throat as her watery eyes bulged from the red balloon of her face. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Mudita. Beautiful work. Next up, last but not least, we have also from the memoir section, Jeff Grazer.
Thank you, Joy, and thank you, Kim. Just a few things for setup of this excerpt. I'm 9 years old. I'm at practice during my first season playing football, and I dreamed of being a professional athlete. Coach Ken stood inside the defense's huddle, calling plays. I couldn't break into the huddle to ask him to use the bathroom. And I definitely wasn't telling Coach D I had to go number 2. He'd think I was trying to take a breather. Yet my stomach dove as if still doing military push-ups. With Coach D surrounded by players huddling for offense, I scanned to make sure no other coaches watched us on the sidelines. I walked slowly backward, eyes still on the field as I neared the lip of the hill. A step away, I snuck one more glance to make sure nobody spotted me at the edge before turning and sprinting downhill. I pulled the elastic belt from my waist while eyeing the school's steel double doors. I could already feel their heat against my palms. Yet as I ran, I started wondering, what if the locker room isn't open? Where were the bathrooms? What if the steel doors are locked? My stomach became a cement mixer. As I neared the sidewalk, something inside me, maybe my will, broke. A steamy release slid into the crotch of my pants. I waddled toward the school. I made a slight leg lift onto the cement stoop outside the doors, trying to keep the mess in one place. In the alcove, shade tempered the heat, but the door handle still warmed my palm as I pulled. Locked. I pulled the other door harder. Nope. Helmet still on, I looked back at the hill's green crest. I heard shouts, but saw nobody running for my capture or rescue. I plodded toward a corner, fully hiding myself from the practice field's view. I swept the blades of grass with my cleats, looking for a rock. I found a mostly flat one. Dropping my pants, I smelled like our yard's messiest dog piles, the kind that stuck to both the grass and shovel's edge. I leaned a hand against the school's brick wall and bent to scrape the brown clumps from the crotch of my white pants. I wiped the rock in the grass. A warm breeze startled my bare backside, and I looked toward the hill again. I don't recall if I considered wiping myself with the rock. I didn't. After a couple minutes of cleaning my pants, I yanked them up and buckled the belt. I thought about never going back up the hill. I could slink along the side of the building and wait for our van. But we hadn't even played a game yet. And my mom had already ordered my Vince Lombardi windbreaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Wow, all of you. I feel like the chat, you should just, if you have not seen what's happening in the chat and people sharing lines and what they love, everyone who just read, make sure you go look there, because there's a lot of lines, mentions and things being said that are really nice. But that was just incredible. I'm just going to do applause for everyone, all of the 4 of you. And I really, really am looking forward to hearing more about these books that you've been working on in the end of year readings that will happen. And I want to just say, on a personal note, I'm part of the process of, at the beginning, when applications come in and when we read through everyone's work and we sort of see the different projects that applicants are working on. And everyone here, everyone who read, I remember your applications, and I remember being blown away when I first saw what you were doing. And it's just such a treat to hear you read it and to hear these very polished sections that you've clearly been working a lot on. So thank you so much again for sharing your work, for being part of this program, for being part of this community. So, and I look forward to hearing more, as I know we all do. So we will be moving to the instructor reading, where each instructor will read for about 3 minutes, just to give you a little bit of their work, so you kind of see what they're working on as writers, separate from instructors. And then we will also talk a little bit about their approach to their workshop, to the genre that they teach in the program. So what I'm going to do, because I've shortened the bios a little bit, just in the interest of time, I'm also going to put a link in the chat to the Manuscript program page, which you can navigate by the different sections of the program, and you can read the longer bios of each instructor. You can also read, if you haven't already, the different descriptions of sections they teach, as well as their outline to their own workshop. So first up, I am so excited to introduce Liz Harmer, who teaches the novel revision section. She is the author of the novels The Amateurs, which is from 2018, and Strange Loops, which came out in 2023, last year. Her stories, essays, and poems have been published widely. She's a recent fellow at the Breadloaf and Sewanee Writers Conferences and the winner of a National Magazine Award for Personal Journalism, a Craft Literary Creative Nonfiction Award, among many other prizes. Liz teaches in the MFA program at Chapman University. So Liz, I'm so glad to have you here.
Oh, thanks, Joy. I'm nervous now because those are some pretty amazing acts to try to follow, but I'm going to do something brave and read from something that's in progress. So this is the novel I'm currently working on. And the novel is, I guess, about the demise of a long marriage. And this section is from the middle, and a young family has just moved from Canada to Southern California. In Riverside, California, we went to Target. That parking lot had painted directional arrows on the lanes and roomy angled spots. The red plastic shopping carts were always strewn with bits of trash that belied the store's clean, upmarket image. We went to Trader Joe's, where the parking spots were not roomy or angled, but as cramped and difficult to navigate as was the small store itself. This was quaintness, part of the store's appeal, that there was always an employee stocking shelves and blocking access to the cheeses. I went to Target. I went to Trader Joe's. As always, I made my efforts to romanticize this small, desperate life. A photo of the moon. A photo of the parrots at the Mission Inn, now dead. A photo of a salad, of a rooftop in LA, of a toddler covered in paint, of a harvest of backyard oranges overfilling the kitchen sink. A photo of someone's pickup truck shellacked with a large iridescent decal, God's first. A photo of the searing aquamarine of a pool. Years would pass this way. I would watch my children watch themselves in screens. We had done this, all the people everywhere. We had done this to our children. On the way to Target, across from the California School for the Deaf, an elderly man wearing all white and a culty grin sometimes popped out of the hedges and shook a tambourine maniacally at the passing cars. On the way out of Target, a man sometimes tried to sell birdhouses or other bits of painted woodwork, a clock, a shelf. Sometimes no man, but only a sign. You'll go to hell for what you've done. Someone on a megaphone down the palm-lined boulevard thought so too. You'll go to hell, repent, repent. I used to pray diligently that God would send me a sign. I wanted John the Baptist to come and tell me what to do, but I did not take these as signs. I thought, everyone in this place is hungry and greedy. That was the evil there at Target, for which we'd pay. The evil was in us, in our two big idling cars and our single family homes. Employees wore red and khaki, the two colors of the damned. There was a Starbucks in the Target because there were Starbucks everywhere. California was nothing but a paved paradise, and so I listened to Joni Mitchell's Blue and did my best to cope with the baking asphalt, the exhaust fumes, the way I sometimes felt that the places I frequented were only places of base commerce. that I will have spent most of my life sitting in traffic. Even coffee was only a concept. The idea of the 90s in Seattle was long dead, and already the sugary drinks everyone waited in drive-thrus for were an Instagram cliche, as was I, with my yoga pants and blonde hair and new desire to do a juice cleanse. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. Just, oh, it's like crackling with imagery and details. It's so good. Thank you. Next up, we have Carolyn Zykowski, who teaches both the poetry hybrid section for anyone working on any kind of poetry collection or hybrid book, something that kind of is yeah, Carolyn can talk more about that later. Let me just leave that at that for now. Poetry hybrid she teaches, and the CNF or nonfiction that is not memoir, both of those sections of the program. Carolyn is the author of 2 hybrid novels and numerous pieces of fiction, poetry, and essays that have been published widely. She holds an MFA from the Jack Kerouac School for Disembodied Poetics and is also a volunteer death doula and a personality typology coach for many talents. So I'm so excited to have you read here, Carolyn. Turning it over to you.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to read 3 short pieces. I consider them poems. They're all in verse, but I simultaneously 100% consider them creative nonfiction. So for our purposes today, I invite you to hear them however you want, and not worry about their genre, which I'll talk about that principle also a little bit later. So this poem, essay, whatever it is called Small Neck of God. Take this river from my palm, 2 million pouched middles of children, oh, the worn necks of gods and ghosts. To the mortar they will go, at the mortar I will wait. It is a dust's holy nest. Take this river from my palm, 16 billion lungs. I will wait for you. 8 billion softly biled livers, 8 billion tiny throats filled with mortar and its brother, dust. In this mannish cave, the small neck of God strains to seize this stuff orphans are made from. Throats of hungry ghosts try to eat, are vexed. 16 billion lungs down here in the care of this dusty blood's script. I will wait as the small nests of poppy and thyme twist around us, covered in 8 billion spires of vespertine rubble. This is called a skin translucent. Backwards born through death, in versions of grass, holy, bargain with dirt's mother, a bell rings, widely, through concentric wombs, the fortress with no walls submits to fawns, tides, sonnets, centuries, all. Thus, death backwards comes, slack wind floats leaves, such green guests scatter over lakes, entering shores. Death is a skin translucent, a bell rings, together birth and death sees, holy. What we talk about when we talk about birds. The dying woman and I watched birds out the window, 8 birds together on one cold feeder in March. I've never known the names of birds, I said. The ice is water now, she said, meaning the puddle. I said, I'd never understood how birds keep warm in winter. She said she didn't know either, but it went unspoken that we wouldn't dare Google. Then she read me her poem about birds, apologizing the whole time for her breath, interrupting her own cherished lines. Keep going, I said. She said, but you have to remember to keep the feeders full. Okay, I promise, I said. Those feeders there, those ones, yes, promise. So one last short piece. This is called Ghost Story. My father used to say, I love you, but I don't like you, which felt possible, as birds or a body do, but nonetheless unfair. My father used to say, punctuation stirring madly in his belly, God is hell. The ghosts who crafted his heart on the stalwart butcher's block seemed to know precisely what he'd carry with him on the train there. The monks said his actions, the priests said all that he loved and feared, the chemist said his ions and his wine, but it was the ghosts who the whole time had him by his holy neck. And bastard that he was, Daddy might have been right about how perhaps we're being had by bodies who've been yearning for their own ghosts all this while. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you, Carolyn. Really powerful. Next up, we have Kim Adrian, and Kim teaches one of the two memoir sections of the program. Kim is the author of the critically acclaimed memoir, The 27th Letter of the Alphabet, also Sock, which a Bloomsbury Object Lessons book, and Dear Knausgaard, which James Wood, literary critic of the New Yorker, described as, quote, a delight from start to finish. Several of her short stories and essays have been listed as notable or distinguished in the Best American Essays, Best American Short Stories, and Pushcart Prize anthologies. Her work has garnered many awards and recognitions, and I'm so happy that she is here with us. Welcome, Kim.
Hey. So I'm going to read, I'm working on a historical novel right now, so that I thought that'd be a little confusing to read in this context. So I'm just going to read from my memoir, which is called The 27th Letter of the Alphabet. It's arranged as a glossary, so there's little entries for each letter. And I'll be reading from the D chapter, just two pretty short, very short entries. I think the only thing that you need to know for the first one is that my daughter's I think she's about 12 in this passage, and she calls my mother mormor, which is a Swedish way of saying grandmother. Doppelgangers. Whenever I see my mother by chance in cafes and gift shops, at the grocery store, or just walking along the street, I think, she looks better than I thought. She looks fine. I think, she's still beautiful. I always slow my pace to study her in detail, though at the same time I am careful not to let her see me. She is always tall and thin, with gray shoulder-length hair, high cheekbones, and long limbs, all of which make sense. But there are other details that don't quite fit, which is why I study her so carefully. For instance, my mother, when I see her by chance here or there around town, is always very well dressed, wearing perhaps a stylish raincoat or pleated slacks and expensive loafers. Her hair is professionally cut, not riddled with bald spots. Also, she doesn't hide her teeth behind her hand when she speaks, and when she does speak, she doesn't do so nervously or for much too long. I notice all these details, and while I recognize the fact that they do not quite make sense, the illusion remains. Sometimes if he's with me, I'll grab David's arm and say, "Is that my mother?" "Are you joking?" he once asked. Another time, not long ago, I was walking with my children in the little commercial center of our town when I spotted my mother in a gourmet ice cream shop. She was sitting with her back to the window, reading a Nadine Gordimer novel, slowly picking at a cup of chocolate ice cream. I stopped to study the slope of this woman's shoulders, the nape of her neck, and the beautiful hand-woven shawl loosely draped around what appeared to be a fine hand-knit sweater. Isabella asked me what was wrong, and I said, "I think that might be mormor." She said, "That is not mormor." I asked my daughter if she was sure, and she said, "Do you really think that if that were mormor, she'd just be sitting there all calm, reading a book and eating an ice cream?" And I said, no, probably she wouldn't be doing those things. But I was still reluctant to leave and remained planted in front of the window until Isabella said, "Mama, it's not her," and pulled me along. The next entry is called Do's and Don'ts, and it's just a pair of quotes. The first quote is from Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk. "Do not lose yourself in the past. Do not lose yourself in the future. Do not get caught in your anger, worries, or fears. Come back to the present moment and touch life deeply." The second quote is from Rumi, and it reads, "Don't regret what's happened. If it's in the past, let it go. Don't even remember it." Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. Next up, we have Melanie Freedom Flynn. who is joining the program for the first time this year, also teaching memoir. Melanie is an award-winning writer whose memoir in progress is currently being supported by grants from the Elizabeth George Foundation and Massachusetts Cultural Council. She's the recipient of a McDowell Fellowship, Jurassic Artist in Residence Fellowship, Atlantic Center for the Arts Residency, among many others. She holds an MFA in acting and has performed in theaters across the country. Welcome, Melanie. So glad you are here with us.
I'm so glad to be here with you all. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just going to read a short piece right from the beginning of my memoir. The memoir is called Backseat Gambler, and this is right from the beginning of the book. Somewhere on the highway to Las Vegas, 1984. We awake before dawn and stuff everything into the maroon Samsonite suitcases. In go my red cotton pants, your deck of cards, and waxy cakes of motel soap. In goes mom's lavender velour shirt and the scratchy motel washcloth still folded in a triangle. Stopping just long enough for you and mom to argue about whether the cosmetic case should be in the back seat with me or in the trunk, we toss the room key at the groggy man behind the front desk and sail onto the highway. It's just getting light, the sky the color of a wet abalone shell. These are the moments between light and dark where everything is possible. No past, no future. We can go anywhere. We can be anything. Broken white lines fly underneath Delilah, our big blue Ford LTD with the creamsicle orange top. The first traces of sunlight sparkle off the guard railing on the side of the highway. You're behind the wheel whistling to Lionel Richie on the radio. Mom's next to you rolling a joint between her long fingers, and I'm stretched out in the back seat with my head against the cosmetic case, making toe print patterns on the window. Chewing a pink gumball from the machine at Denny's, I grip the gum with my fingers and teeth and stretch it out the length of my arm, then twist it around my index finger until the tip turns white. As smoke curls in wisps from the front seat, I drape my other hand over my heart and mouth the Pledge of Allegiance. I learned the pledge when we lived in Las Vegas. First thing every morning, we all stood up when the man's voice crackled over the intercom, "All rise," and said the pledge to an American flag drooping in the corner of the classroom. When you got news this was how my school day started, you told me that I didn't have to say a phony pledge to any flag. Mel, I gave you the name of freedom. So that means that you remember you have the ability to make your own decisions. Your middle name means you choose who you have allegiance with. No chance in hell a second grade teacher is going to make a soldier taking orders out of my kid. I'm a World War II vet, for Christ's sakes. You hear what I'm saying to you? I nodded and told you that I did. But I said the pledge at school anyway. It was just easier that way. Besides, I was only at that school for 3 months before we were back on the road. Pass me a hit on that joint, would you? You say as the desert turns the color of pencil shavings. You're a really loud joint smoker. Mom smokes joints just like she smokes her long brown minty cigarettes, but you make the smoke loud on the way in and even louder on the way out because you usually cough until you turn the color of my magenta crayon. When you cough like that, you roll down the window to spit, and sometimes the spit sticks to the window and streaks until the wind finally dries it up. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Such a great visceral opening. I love it. Thank you. Next up, I'm so excited to introduce Peter Medeiros, who teaches the novel First Draft, and he teaches writing and Kung Fu, though never at the same time. He teaches in and around Boston, and that remains a major inspiration for much of his fiction. He received his MFA in creative writing from Emerson College and has been publishing fiction since 2013. He's represented by Susan Velasquez Colmont at Jabberwocky Literary Agency. And Peter, you also are a sci-fi fantasy writer that has a lot of experience in those genres too. I'll say that just because it might be of interest to anyone.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm so pleased to be here. A lot of hard acts to follow. I'll be reading a short excerpt from a story in my forthcoming collection. The story is called Forever Lights. It is speculative. It's the best season for ghost stories. And I will say there is brief mention of ghosts and death. All right. Dr. Lorena Hanisch was good at a lot of things: theoretical physics, applied thermodynamics, advanced calculus, and the accordion. She was good at these, she said, naturally, almost without practice. Practice, she told me, can help you hone your talents, but it won't upset natural inclinations. You can't say that to a bunch of MIT undergrads, but there you are. When Dr. Hanisch was a girl, her father insisted she play soccer. She seemed to grow less coordinated every season until a busted knee in 6th grade ended her father's athletic ambitions for her and made sure she would never again miss an episode of Nova. She told me the one thing she practiced, foolishly, was trying to get her husband, the late Dr. Clifford Hanisch, to shut up and let her do the talking in interviews. She practiced for years, and with no success. She told me all this without turning from the passenger window, though there was nothing to see but the glow of street lamps in the distance. She paused. So what do you think? The doctor asked questions aggressively. I told her my dad said I could be anything I wanted with enough practice. I told her my 7th grade basketball team won states. Well, what do you want to be right now? She asked. The chauffeur of a grouchy Nobel laureate, the ice queen of clean energy? You want to be an underpaid driver freezing his ass off, getting this old bat to a power plant middle of nowhere? I said, ma'am, what I want to be is asleep. She laughed and coughed and finally settled down in the seat. We wouldn't talk anymore all the way to Wiscasset. I had not expected to see Dr. Lorena Hanisch again. After her husband died, she sold off the beach house in Castine and told me straight off she would end her days in the Florida home. Clifford died chasing one of their dogs into a snowstorm. She had watched him hobble after the mutt, stood in the doorway for 20 minutes. She went inside. She dialed 911. She told them he was dead. Then she called me to get her to the hospital because she didn't want to ride in the back of any ambulance, and she did want to stop for coffee on the way. This was 9 o'clock at night. In this part of Maine, the Starbucks closes at 8. People asked me if she saw her husband's ghost when it happened. If anybody could, they reasoned, it would be her. I told them what Lorena Hanisch always told me: there's no such thing as ghosts. And when they started to protest, when they said that her work had more or less proven the existence of life or something after death, I'd add, as she always did, where there's smoke, there's fire. There's not always a smoking gun. But she'd called me yesterday. First time I heard her voice in the year since Cliff's death. And now I was driving her from the airport to the spiritual residue plant in Wiscasset. We passed beneath street lamps that would never go out. She held a small black box in her lap and a set of thick, fuzzy headphones. And I'll admit, I was curious. To the best of anyone's knowledge, Dr. Hanisch and her husband hadn't so much as published an article since they invented the SR turbines that solved our energy problems, that stopped the oil wars. Or as some people said, since they'd saved the world.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Peter. Love that. And I'm so sorry I forgot to mention that you have a forthcoming collection coming out. So feel free to put that, share info on that in the chat if you want, if you have info on it, and if it can be shared. Our final reading of the instructors is Blair Hurley, who's actually not here, but she has recorded her reading for us. So I'm going to actually play that for you. Blair is the author of The Devoted, which was longlisted for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize. Her second novel, Minor Prophets, was released last year. Her work is also published widely in respected literary journals. She will tell you why she can't be here, but basically she's on a writing retreat.
Hi, everyone. My name is Blair Hurley, and I teach the Novel in a Year program. I'm sorry I won't be able to be there live this time for the open house. I will actually be at a writing retreat during that time. So yes, I am prioritizing my writing, making sure I'm working on my own next novel, and I'll be excited to have any of you join my class next year. So I thought I would read from my second novel called Minor Prophets just for a few minutes. So first of all, Minor Prophets is about an apocalyptic cult in the wilds of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. And it's from the perspective of a girl growing up in that cult. And there are periods in which she has left the cult and is looking back at it. So I thought I would read from that portion. At home in their shared bedroom, with Kiki snoring in the bunk bed above her, Nora clicks the link she sent to her phone for the forum for cult survivors. She taps and scrolls and skims, the details strange and familiar. She's looking for clues, signs that her mother was here. There's a gaggle of fundamentalist Mormons describing the horrors of their child marriages, the children they left behind in order to flee. A few psychedelic New Agers waking up slowly from a 20-year hallucinogenic dream. The Heaven's Gate followers who weren't there that day for the mass suicide, who still aren't sure what happened or why they survived. There are Moonies and members of the Universal Love Temple, the 12 tribes, the Order of the Solar Temple, the family, the farm, the brethren. Debates rage across the forum on what constitutes a cult, whether a fundamentalist Baptist is allowed to join, or a former member of the Aryan Nation. One is too mainstream, the other a political action group. It does not carry the same burden of miracle, the promise of radical bodily salvation. A man from a back to the land commune in Southern California writes that he grew up picking grapes in homemade hemp clothing and praying to Gaia, the earth goddess. He writes, I still don't know which of the mothers was my mother and which of the fathers was my father. Nora can taste the bitterness coming off the forum in waves, the anger in the all caps descriptions of the Mormons' custody battles, the shunning and secrecy and extreme Amish spinoffs, the militant control of information and selfhood everywhere. We couldn't get calls from home. We couldn't read a newspaper without permission. They took our passports, our driver's licenses. Our every thought and feeling was subject to control. Who is that anonymous poster mourning her separation from her children? Who is the poster who was Catholic once and was drawn into a harder strain of Christianity? Any of them could be her mother, but nothing definitive jumps out. For almost all of the groups, there was a single figurehead, someone charismatic and deadly who pulled the people in, drained their bank accounts, stole their children, and ruined their lives. David Koresh, Jim Jones, Warren Jeffs, T and Doe, the leader who comforts you, seduces you, makes you fall in love, then makes you afraid to leave.
I'm going to stop Blair there, but thank you, Blair, and I hope you are having a wonderful time on your retreat. So I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who read. Those were incredible readings. I think it's so helpful to hear a little bit about what the instructors in any program are doing in their own work as writers. So we will be moving now into the informational part where we'll be talking a little bit more about the program itself, about the specific sections of the program, because while this is a program that has these shared elements throughout, each instructor also brings their own flavor to their teaching, their own philosophies, and of course they're curating the books that are read, they're curating the readings, they're designing an outline in terms of how they will guide you through these 10 months of book work, of work on your manuscript. We're going to hear briefly from each instructor and for just a couple minutes for each person to tell us a little bit about what their teaching looks like and if there's any special focuses they bring to their section of the program. Then we'll open it up to Q&A, and if you have specific questions on the program or for a particular instructor, we can get into all of that then. Carolyn, is it all right if we start with you since you have the two sections?
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready to go first and tell us a
Sure.
little about your approach?
So, I teach the poetry hybrid and the creative nonfiction sections. One thing that's really important across both is if you studied with me, you know I have a lot of thoughts about genre being a construct. Genre and gender, same root word, basically means category and is open for a non-binary interpretation, if you will. So we interrogate these categories a lot in my classes, but especially in the poetry hybrid, while simultaneously digging deep into the useful elements of craft and genre. So in the poetry and hybrid groups, we get a wide range of projects and forms, traditional and contemporary approaches to line and verse, always being a part of it, prose poetry, lyric essay and hybrid essay, poetry forms which move between different forms and genres, novels and verse, visual art, poetry mashups, and really exciting new terms like the poet's novel, speculative memoirs, which mixes like myth, poetry, personal storytelling, anti-memoir and experimental hybrid memoir. These are terms that the students have gotten very excited about in the past, and we do chapbooks and full-length manuscripts. In creative nonfiction, we get a surprisingly wide range. And you can see a lot of the things we might write about in the course description, but there's obviously a lot of overlap with memoir and other genres. And we go a little bigger with creative nonfiction also into, personal writing mixed with non-personal writing, literary journalism, popular sociological and science writing, and philosophy, all that really good stuff. And this is for essay collections and full books as well. So my big teaching philosophy, one of them anyway, I really feel strongly about the generation stage drafting, staying with the process. I like the metaphor of gardening. We buy the tools, we read the books, we talk to experts or groups, we learn about different light and water requirements, and it's sort of like the craft of gardening, but you'll never get to the end product if you neurotically dig up all the roots. Are you done? Are you done? Are you done? That there's a magic in the process as well that we need to honor. And so, the science and the mad part, like the mad scientist, the scientist being the craft, the study, trying different methods, but the sort of madness being the intuition and the trust and the play. I like to encourage people to sort of blow up the lab and trust they'll scream eureka eventually, which they will. So needing to find a reason other than publication for writing, while also honoring goals. I want to be, interviewed by Terry Gross as much as all of us do. And we do talk about how to get there, but we're never going to reach those goals if we can't be fascinated about the process. This is an ancient process. Creativity is our birthright. We have to bow to it. And I feel that we've maybe forgotten, or maybe capitalism has snuck in and taught us creativity is a factory or a worker bee. Fire yourself if you don't do a good job on the assembly line or whatever. So I talk a lot about how that's just not how creativity works. It's not how writing works. Almost everyone I know who approaches it in that way gets hurt on the job, so to speak. So it can ironically also take longer to come to the product and also the publishing or whatever goals, if you don't honor the more mysterious and messy, glorious mess, I call it, parts of the process. So if you want to maximize your vision and your voice and your potential, come play come play, because that's how you're going to get there. It's in the process. So just a real quick last thing, my goal is to create a learning environment where we're all in solidarity with one another, supporting each other's writing and learning in a way that's sort of equal parts gentle and diligent, equal parts heart and intellect, which, that's also a false dichotomy, but without the community and the craft study, the writing generally won't get done. And community is the point of these groups in a way. So otherwise we could choose to work alone or one-on-one with a coach. So yeah, I think that's where I'll leave it for now. But thanks so much for considering and for coming here today.
Thank you, Carolyn. So let's go to the memoir instructors next, and then we'll do novel instructors. So Kim, let's go to you, and then Melanie to talk a little bit about your approach.
I think my approach, I really ask my students to look at three things to really focus on. I encourage them to take chances with their voices. And that's a matter of like reading other people really carefully and noticing when you can hear a voice on the page and starting to think about how that might happen in your own work. I ask students to look really closely at how narratives are made actually with time and how we can work with time. There's like speeds of time. We can write in a scene that goes kind of at a lifelike pace. We can go faster with something like summary, or we can just slow down completely and kind of go take a detour, do an aside. So I start asking students to think about manipulating time within the prose itself. You can also think about, we spend a lot of time talking about the horizontal dimension of narrative versus the vertical, which is pretty similar to, not identical, but quite similar if you're familiar with Vivian Gornick's The Situation and the Story. So how to tell a story that unfolds with something like what you might call a plot, where things happen and change. That would be the horizontal narrative. But then, where does the depth of feeling really come from? And that's your vertical dimension. So we use, we go over terms like this. We try to see how these things work in other people's memoirs so that the students can then start to maybe employ some of these techniques themselves. But I think the main thing that I really, really focus on and bear down on, and it's so hard in memoir writing, is moving out of generalities into particularity and specificity. And I think that's hard because it's hard, period, when you're writing, anything narrative. But it's especially hard in memoir because we kind of carry around our life stories, and they wind up often, especially if we're talking about things like different eras of our life or different experiences, we round off the corners and they become kind of generalized. So that's just a lot of work, is getting particular and different ways that you might do that. So I don't have a lot, I could go on and on about this one, but I'll stop there.
Thanks so much, Kim. So Melanie, I'll go to you next. Talk about your section.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be joining Kim here. And, what I would say, for me, one of the things that strikes me so much about finishing a book is that it really does take a community. That's been my experience. The work that we do alone with the blanks with our blank pages are very supported by the community that we surround ourselves with. And we see this, we're all drawn to reading the acknowledgement sections of books, right? To see the number of people that touch the making of a book. And a couple of my favorite things in acknowledgements, I'm just going to read you a couple. Terry Tempest Williams in the acknowledgements for When Women Were Birds, which is just such a beautiful memoir that I love. She says, a book is created in community. And then Valerie Kaur, the author of See No Stranger, says, no one gives birth alone, and the role of the midwife is perhaps just as essential as the body doing the creating. And so, yeah, in this program, over the course of the 10 months that we'll be together, we'll build a community together, and the community will be nurturing and solid and inspiring, where we'll study craft. We're going to read really deeply and help each other harness our authentic voices. And I see it as a place that we go to inspire and support one another. And so then when we sit back down alone to write, we have the whole strength of this community behind us. So I think of this group as like a lighthouse. So as we move forward with writing on our own, which is very mysterious, sometimes turbulent. I fully agree with Carolyn, it's magical and very awe-filled. And so in this process of writing and bringing our book into being, we'll be in community with one another and support one another. So I look forward to meeting you and answering any questions.
Thank you so much, Melanie. So let's go to the novel instructors. Peter, I'm gonna start with you to tell us a little about your section.
Sure. The way I think about teaching the novel is I try to make sure that everyone can feel ambitious, has permission to be ambitious. The great writer Kate Wilhelm says a short story should plumb one life fully, and the novel gets to do more than that. It can plumb the world fully, and that's sort of okay. Or you can try to, at least when you're drafting, and to hold on to that ambition and let it guide you during a first draft. I don't want to echo what other people have said already, but community is such a big part of that and building that up. In the same way that if you have an ambitious project, that's going to require you to negotiate with, the craft components that we have. You want to negotiate with your own ambition and your own goals. You also have to negotiate with other people. And that's sort of the power and the danger, if I can say that, of existing in community is what makes it powerful. And you do have to kind of negotiate every workshop with your workshop buddies. And that might negotiate sounds like such an unsexy word. And it can sound like, we negotiate with bad folks, but there's something really powerful about negotiation. And I try to put a lot of emphasis on that because, working closely with a group of people creatively, it really requires some vulnerability and checking in with one another over a long period of time. Ursula Gwynn, quote I think about all the time in regards to craft as well. She says, love doesn't sit there like a stone. It has to be made and remade daily like bread. And I think that's the same relationship we have with our craft and with each other, at least ideally when a workshop's going good. And I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Peter. Love everything that everyone's saying. I'm also now just setting up Blair Hurley's video. So she will tell us from this pre-recorded video what her approach to the novel first draft. So Peter and Blair both teaching different sections of the novel first draft.
In my novel classes, I really aim to make the process of writing a novel transparent, inviting, and hopefully fun as well. All of you are there because you felt something that haunted you in some way, something that couldn't leave you alone, something that kept you up at night. I often say to my students, if there's something that just won't leave you alone, then you're probably writing a novel. If you're troubled by it, if you're unsettled by it, that's probably the start of a novel. And so that process is a long and steady one of trying to figure out what that means to us, why that story came to us the way it did, and how we want to turn it into a meaningful story, what's really at the heart of it. So every month we meet together on Zoom, we talk about an aspect of craft that will help you continue your writing, build your writing skills. If you're already an experienced writer, it's good just to return to the fundamentals sometimes about voice, about language, about story structure, and the surprising ways we can innovate with that, about character building, and all sorts of more advanced topics like who is entitled to write what kind of story, about authority, about distance and perspective. All these things are craft topics that we talk about on different days. And of course, we have a rousing, lively, and encouraging workshop. So we'll be sharing with each other twice over the course of the 10 months. You get a chance to share that work and to get feedback from each other about those portions from your novel. Another aspect of the class that I really love is the accountability buddies, which Joy will probably explain more, but just in case I'll mention it, which is that every month students are assigned to have an accountability buddy. So it's someone who keeps you honest throughout that month. You check in with each other in your own time. You schedule a time that works for you both. You report back. You can exchange for more work if you'd like to do that and give each other feedback. You have at least one check-in over that month to see how it's all going, to commiserate, to celebrate, to share your triumphs and struggles. And then we switch it up every month so that there's someone new to hold you accountable. So I often hear from students that's the most common thing that they're really looking for when they sign up for a class like this, to have that mutual accountability, someone to cheer you on, to make sure that you've got someone to report to about how your word count went this month. And I'll be there to cheer you on, to offer my thoughts and recommendations, to be sharing craft essays on our topic of the month or any other things that catch my eye. I'll be very active in the Google Classroom, giving my book recommendations or raising questions about current controversies that have arisen, and just sort of reporting in and seeing how you are doing. It's sort of up to you about whether you want me to be someone who's pushing you hard and is putting you through a boot camp for your novel, or whether you need a softer touch, someone who's just there to encourage you when you need it. And that's why the conferences are great. So you'll also have a chance to have individual conferences with me where we can gauge what you most need right now, right? What I can help you with, what I can support you in, what questions you have, and so on. So you'll have a chance to just have an in-depth conversation with me too about your process. So I'll just say one more thing, which is a quotation that I like to use as a sort of motto for my class, which is from the poet W.H. Auden, who said, "Great art is clear thinking about mixed feelings." I think about that a lot in my own writing. And I think it's a really important two-step process of writing. We need that clear thinking. We need sort of refining our thoughts and reaching insights as one big reason why we read. But we also need to entertain the idea that there are states in our lives that are where we feel more than one thing at once, where we experience mixed feelings, like bittersweet feelings, for example, or moments when we might feel that we're supposed to feel sad, but we don't, and we feel guilty about that. It's those moments, I think, when our characters are torn between opposing states of being that make for the most fruitful scenes and moments in their stories.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Blair, recorded Blair. And last but not least, Liz Harmer, who teaches the novel revision section. And this is the only section of the program where applicants are expected to have a full completed manuscript. So that can be a very rough first draft that you want to spend the year, the months revising, or it could be a fifth draft or some other level draft that you want to work on revision. So basically, it's a slightly different section of the program that is a smaller group of writers, 8 writers, and it is focused. Everyone reads a full manuscript from the class each month. So workshopping is full manuscript. So it's a little bit more intensive in terms of reading load, and also in terms of what you need to be considered for that section, for that group. So Liz, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Joy. I'm having a lot of big feelings about community and creativity right now. So grateful to all of my fellow instructors, and to you, Joy. Well, you already said what I was going to say, which is that the novel revision workshop is really different because everyone comes in with a manuscript. It's been hitting me this year what a unique opportunity this is to have 8 other writers who read all the time and think all the time about writing, have their eyes on your manuscript. I wish I'd had that. And one of the pitfalls in revising a novel, which is maybe one of the painful parts of writing a novel, which is that you start to lose faith in it. I believe that revision can be a place for generation and a place for play as much as the writing itself can be. And so one of the things I think about with teaching revision is how to stay in touch with the energy and vitality of like the first draft, or how to get back in touch with that. The other thing that I find challenging and interesting about teaching novel revision is that there are many, many ways to write a novel. And each novel has its own demands for revision. It's impossible to have a set of rules to revise by. So one of the things I think about when I'm teaching is how to honor what the novel wants to be, what each novel wants to be. Doing that by reading 3 novels with very different forms and styles, different goals and different effects, and trying to study those. But we also just do, lots of craft stuff. So we do big structural edits, we do reverse outlining, and then we go into more micro elements. So sometimes we're trying to visualize the whole structure of the novel we've written, and sometimes we're trying to figure out if we've done dialogue well in a scene. And so there's just lots of things going on in the revision workshop. But one of the main benefits is that that community, that tight community where we all just really carefully read each other's manuscripts. I'll end there.
Thank you so much, Liz. Really helpful. So we have about 10 minutes, and then we are going to need to end the open house in this event. And I know we probably won't get to all of the questions that there are. Let me just say that please put any questions you have in the chat, and we will get to as many as we can. And a lot of the info is on the website. And let me just say a couple things that I know come up, because I know these kind of questions we do get a lot of. Firstly, a lot of people ask about what section of the program might be right for them. Should they be in this or that, or and let me just say, if you are working on something, a project, a book-length project, you're unsure if it's maybe memoir, or is it more like the kind of nonfiction that Carolyn's section focuses on, which can be more academic or scholarly or journalistic. the best thing to do is just to go into our application where there will be places to describe the project, describe your focuses, and just share with us what you're working on. And we will, if you're accepted into the program, we will place you in the workshop section that really makes sense. And a big part of the process of going through applications and assembling these groups into these cohorts of writers is that the work itself is in conversation. And there's a lot of thought that goes into that, where there's nothing kind of automatic about how we do this process. We are really thinking about, does this person belong with these other writers working on these kinds of things in this group? So if you have any doubt about that, the best thing to do is just to apply and tell us in the application as clearly as you can about what you're working on and what you want out of the program. And basically, we will be in touch with you if we have questions. The other thing I'll say, a question we get a lot is, what are we looking for in the application? When you apply for this, what are the qualities? Because this is a program that is open to writers working at different stages of book length process and at different levels. Some people do have a lot more experience. Some people are newer in their writing journey, and that's okay. We actually really like that aspect of the program. What writers share in common, and what the writers that we are looking for, are writers that are serious about doing this work, writers that have a drive to get this book out, and that in that sort of what a lot of the instructors said in their description of their programs, that have an investment and an interest in community as well. So the community aspect of this program is very, very important. And you'll see in the application that we really screen for people that care about that, and that will put that as a priority, and not just looking for feedback on their work and then to check out. Because as you can imagine, you can't really sustain a community program that feels inspiring if that's the approach. So we're really looking for people that want to be part of what we hope, and what has in many cases become little pockets of writing community that last even beyond this program. People that stay in touch, that are lifelong readers for each other, lifelong friends, and that some tight-knit writing community really forms. And with that, there really is accountability to helping each other just as much as there is for your own work. So yeah, I would say that the two big things are community and interest in all aspects of the program too, which are very community oriented: the accountability buddies, the Google Classroom, the workshop, the conferences with the instructor, as well as the developing of your own book. So it's very important to just be aware of what the program entails, and that it's not a program where you can sort of opt out of some of this and be there for the parts you want. It really is to create a community that feels inspiring. It really is. We are looking for writers that want this full package. Let me turn over to questions. Heather, do you see any Heather is kind of scanning through. Are there any that have come up?
Yeah, there has been, but our instructors have been really great about responding to some of these. So I encourage everybody to check out the chat as well, just for their own words. So with the time, we do have a question from Ellie about the acceptance rate for the novel revision course, but I'm assuming that's probably for any course, anybody be interested. How many applicants do you tend to get for the 8 spots?
So I will say, I can answer that too, because I'm on the end of a lot of applications coming in. It changes every year. I will say that we are getting more and more applicants every year. So last year, the novel section, the novel first draft and novel revision definitely get the sort of the bulk of applicants. Memoir and novel tend to be popular. It's very hard to answer specifics, so I just will say that there definitely are more applicants than there are spots.
We have a question from Hannah asking, which Kim has answered, but if anybody has a different answer, are workshop days only craft lessons, or are there workshop days also centered around the group's writing projects?
I can say that basically my class does once a month 3-hour meetings, and there's usually 2 intensive workshops in each one, and then some craft study, and then some reflection or in class exercises and goal setting, things like that.
Yeah, and Peter also mentioned ideally they go together. We can use the craft talk as some of our touchstones for the workshop.
I would add that my section will run very similarly to what Carolyn just said as the structure.
There's a question for Carolyn about the hold on. Talking about the difference between CNF and poetry hybrid.
Well, honestly, all of the sections honestly have a lot of overlap. So my biggest answer would be to what Joy said about not worrying too much about it, especially CNF and memoir. Like there's a lot of people asking about the difference. But I would say the biggest thing for my CNF and my poetry hybrid is form. So the CNF group tends to be more conventional prose. With once in a while, we get some interesting lyric essay kind of hybrid stuff, but it tends more towards prose. And then the hybrid and poetry tends more toward what we might, as a society, think of as poetic forms or experimental forms. Although, you know, but we also do get people in poetry hybrid who are working on prose related things like experimental memoirs, weird hybrid prose poetry, fiction things. So, and we've gotten people who've gone between groups and taken both because they got inspired by something from one group and then wanted to, you know, so I'm sorry that's not a super clear answer, but we'll help you if you aren't sure.
I just put a couple things in the chat because we do have to end in just a second. Put the link to our manuscript program page, which has info on all of the different on the main program, what is included in the main program, as well as each section. And if you're thinking like, well, if you want to sort of get a sense of the outline of like the monthly topics included, you can do that for each instructor's section, and you can have a sense of that. So I do recommend reading through that and really kind of seeing the differences there. I also put the email address where you can send us any questions that weren't answered. I want to also just quickly a question about should we specify which instructor we want or feel we need? So that is up to you actually. And when in the application, which is open today, there's a link on our website. You can go to it and you can see what is asked. I will say that it's more helpful if you have flexibility, if like you're applying for novel first draft and you feel you would be fine in either of the two sections, that kind of does give you the most likelihood of being in one of those. But if there is a particular instructor you want to work with, if you feel you really need someone's approach, then there is a place in the application where you can specify that. Just make sure that it is mentioned in the application. There is a place that says, please specify preferences for instructors, or if you don't have a preference, let us know too. So there is also a place where you can mention a second choice, and that does increase chances that we'll be able to put you somewhere, depending again on number of applications and how competitive it is that year. Of course, if you don't have, if another genre just wouldn't be right for what you're working on, then we wouldn't put you in that other group. But if you think it's on the fence, or if you do work across multiple genres, and there have been many applicants that do have multiple projects, like a nonfiction project and a novel project. And if that is the case, and you'd be happy to go in to take different sections of this program, then you can let us know that as well. I'm so sorry that we have to end the session, but you definitely feel free to email any questions to that email. Check out the application, see what is asked, and you'll see our focus. I think that what we are looking for comes through in what we are asking in the application. It really is. I didn't mention this, but I really will say, like, the strength of your work is something that the strength and seriousness that you have for your own work, the strength and seriousness that you have as a literary citizen in like to the group that you're going to be in, and that you want to form community and you want to be part of what this program is and the different aspects. Those are the two main things that we look at, and that we feel that you would be someone that would really benefit from this program, as well as benefiting your classmates. So we're looking at that. And I just can't thank enough all of the readers, instructors, the current writers in the program. Thank you so much. Thank you, Montana and Marissa, for being here as our TAs and seeing everything that we're doing here and meeting the community. Thank you, Heather, for all your help, for fielding the questions and being so helpful behind the scenes. Thank you to everyone who joined us, who is a current student in the program, for just being part of this community. And it is always such a joy to see the excitement and to meet the writers coming in. Other instructors, if you're here, Michael Mercurio is here. And thank you to everyone for being here, for those interested, those considering taking this journey with us. Thank you. We, as you can see, we're all writers. And for the application, is December 20th. So you have until that amount of time to think about that and work on that. And thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of the day.